Yeah. All right.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome back. We are now entering part 3 of this 4-part series, the faculty speaker series that Dr. Flores has been presenting is on coactive coaching model. And there's been several parts. The first part sort of talked about people being naturally creative and resourceful and whole, right? And he asked us to ask some important questions. Some of them were what's possible, right? That was one question, what's possible? And where do I limit myself? Those were two big guiding sort of questions to get us to think about what limits us in terms of us achieving what we want in life. And then in part 2, Dr. Flores talked about focusing on the whole person, and that, you know, there's people behind the work, and he gave examples of using a report and how people can sometimes get lost in being a number in a report and not realizing they have a life outside of that work that also is impacting maybe their performance at work, and seeing them as a whole person, you know, adds more reality to what we can do to help coach that person and understand their circumstances. And he was very strategically, I believe he and Juan were sort of role playing there in that conversation where Jimmie was practicing strategic questioning techniques on Juan, and Juan was, you know, sort of playing along with that. And so I found that to be very valuable, to see the modeling of that interaction of Jimmie with these techniques. So in part 3 for today will be to dance in this moment. And so I will just turn it over to you now, Dr. Flores, and let you begin.
All right. Thank you so much, Kevin. And thank you everyone for being here. I know y'all are busy and finding this hour can be difficult. And I want to just start with the dance in this moment and talk about its value and kind of where we've gone. So here's the model itself, if you remember. So we did start off with the people are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, focus on the whole person. And then up on the top right is dance in this moment. Now, these are not necessarily done in order. I know they're presented in order in the book, but think about also what's inside, being active listeners, intuition, deepen and forward, self-management, curiosity. I want to talk real quickly about self-management because that's something that I had to really work on when I was going through this program. I just want to give you a heads up on where I am with that. So what's today? Today's Tuesday? Yeah, next Tuesday. Next Wednesday, I'm doing what's called the oral exam. So I have to do a coaching session with 2 of the coactive people that are representing the Institute. And so I will do a coaching session for 30 minutes. And yes, I'm already a little nervous about it because after 6 months, I have to come in and practice the skills that I supposedly learned over these months. So it's going to be fun, and I'll be happy when it's all said and done. So I'm looking forward to that. So with dance in this moment, this is one of the ones when I first saw it, I go, what is this all about? Now, this is already like dance in what moment? And I found out later by just observing other people coaching the value of that. But let me just throw it out there. If you were just a novice, didn't know anything about the coaching model, but what would dance in this moment? What does it say to you? How does it speak to you? What is it?
Well, this is Dr. McAfee. For me, it's being present in the moment that you are experiencing at this time.
That's a good observation. And you know what? That's part of the definition. All right, good. Anybody else?
Submitting yourself to the moment.
Yeah, being present and submitting yourself to that moment is a good one as well. Did I pronounce that right? I am hoping I'm pronouncing the names right. Anybody else? One more.
How about mastering the moment?
Okay, good. And the reason I said one more is because that also goes into the deepen and forward. Okay, and it's another skill set that we learn because it's very typical to say, okay, great, that's a nice answer, and then let's move along. And the coachee, if you're working with a student or you're working with an employee, if you say, hey, what's wrong or what's holding you back? Oh, it's just that I'm not a morning person. You go, okay, well, why don't you get up earlier and set your alarm? That didn't really solve there might be something beyond it. And that's where this dance in this moment is appropriate. And I'll share more information with you about it. I found that when I was coaching and I was in the moment with the coachee, with the client, that I was really listening. I was picking up on things. For example, I was picking up on, I was coaching this young lady. She was probably about 28, 30 years old or so. And I said, hey, Carla, what's going on? And she said, oh, I don't know, just looking forward to another opportunity here at work. And I go, okay, well, tell me more about that. That's a coaching question. Tell me more about it. Well, yeah, well, it's going to be difficult because I'm going to be working in another department. It sounds like you're expecting a challenge or something like that. She goes, yeah, and I kept asking these questions. This is kind of like the Socratic method, right? The why kind of thing. Eventually, we got to the point that her big concern was that she was going to move back with her ex-husband. And so that first question that I asked about moving to a different department had nothing to do. So she was nervous that she was going to move back with her ex-husband, and that might cause problems with her work environment because she's going to have a different mindset. That's the forward and deepening, and just keep asking questions. All right, so let's talk about dance in this moment. And this is information that comes straight from the guidebook that we use. When we want to include all aspects of our humanity, heart, mind, body, and spirit. Where do we normally live in our world, in a work world? Where are we most of the time? In which one of those?
Our mind, I guess.
Yeah, we are very like, okay, well, let me think about how I should react. But a lot of times we're not sharing what we really feel. And why is it that we're not as open to opening up our, say, heart? Why is it that we may not want to do that when we're speaking with somebody?
Maybe you feel like it's none of their business. I mean, I know where you're going with this, Jimmy, but there are some people that, I being one, I'm a very private person, and I don't think that it's anybody's business to know what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, unless I choose to, tell them. And I don't particularly think that there's anything wrong with that. Yes, there are people that, my God, you say hello, and then the floodgates open up and they'll spill their guts. And, to each his own. That's not me.
So when you use the word choice, it seems like that's an important word for you. That's an important value for you to have choices, right?
An important value. I mean, is there a choice whether you open the floodgates and tell everybody something or keep it quiet? I guess sure there's a choice.
Right. And so again, that's you notice just a quick thing on one there. I didn't go to the point of opening the floodgates, and that's important, obviously, because he said it. However, when the word choice comes up there, that's a powerful value. I mean, we want to have choices. I mean, we had a choice not to be here today, right? All of us. And it's powerful. So that's where you want to explore that with your coachee or with your students or with your employees. Man, there's something about choice there, isn't there? Oh yeah, and all of a sudden that becomes the reason that they came to you, because they want choices. I heard some.
Yeah, this is Patricia. It's also about vulnerability. When we begin sharing things and opening up, then it makes us more vulnerable.
Yeah, there's something about that, Patricia's vulnerability. I found out because I was doing a presentation about 18 months ago before COVID. And I was doing a presentation in front of peers, that like today, this is usually one of the hardest ones. I mean, it's not that hard right now, but because you guys are pleasant and nice, but peer presentations can be very difficult sometimes. And so I was doing this presentation and I said something like, one time a student told me that I wasn't fair when I was grading. And I shared that. And then I went on and talked about something else. And somebody and then they were asked to give me feedback. And somebody said, well, Jimmie, you know what I really liked is that you showed vulnerability, that you showed that students couldn't get upset with you when you don't grade, when they don't perceive you to grade fairly. And that's important because if we're not vulnerable, if we're not vulnerable, are we a human?
I don't know about the answer to that, but I know I do not like feeling vulnerable.
Okay.
I guess there's a time and a place to feel vulnerable,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, with your spouse, with whatever, but at least with me, I don't particularly want to be in that type of position with
Mhm.
with the Walking Dead, the masses, you know, with my family, with it, that might be different, sure. So it depends on the person, maybe.
Yeah, and it's interesting, guys. When I've been doing these coaching, remember, I'm not a professional coach. I mean, I'm going to get a certificate that says I'm a professional coach, but I'm not a professional coach. Okay?
You're
But-
the coach, Jimmie. You're the coach.
Yeah. So, but what I'm mentioning here is that you'd be surprised, like when you're doing the coaching sessions, how much stuff people tell you. Like I coach some people 6, 8, 10 times. I'm not talking about crazy stuff. I'm just saying, hey, you know, the reason I act that way is because I'm tired of being bullied. You know, they start really like telling you what they feel. So that's where we are here. And I'll show you a video in a second about that. That's very, very important to this discussion. All right, we also include the many roles the person may have. For example, and Juan is talking about this, which is very important. A person might be a manager, a parent, a business partner, an artist, and a provider. Let me ask you this. Depending on the role, some of us have 3 or 4 of those roles. Do we change the way we conduct ourselves depending on the role?
I believe we do. Yes.
Good thing, bad thing?
I think it can be either, depending on the outcome of how you're behaving.
Right, okay. What if this morning I was at Bible study class and somebody said, you know, the key to things is to be honest. Honesty is so important. Do you think that honesty is a value that I should have as a manager, parent, business partner, artist, provider, and so on? Is that one that you could have throughout here?
I think so. I think you can be honest, yes. But
Yeah.
I think that some of our behaviors are driven by what's socially acceptable.
Right?
So we may find ourselves in a role and behave in a manner that's not what's classified as socially acceptable for that role. And so that's where maybe some conflict would start.
Mhm, mhm. And
Like
honestly,
Jimmie, when you know, you have manager and parent up here. I mean, when you are a manager, you're working for somebody else. And so you basically act the way they want you to act, follow policy and all that. And as a parent, you're the chief, you call the shots. So no question that it depends on the role as to, you know, how you're going to go about doing things.
right, so there are, and both of you, Patricia and Juan, you make good points, is that we do change our way of doing things, correct? But what about this concept? And this is another course that I finished recently. Which one, if we're a manager, parent, so on, should we always be authentic?
We may try to, but we may try to, or it depends on how we perceive the things that we are trying to. But most of the time, we are the best judge of ourselves. So we put out, like you said, people have different faces.
Mhm, mhm.
So it depends on the situation. Yes, we might think we're authentic, but however, somebody else might think we are full of ABCD, for lack of better word. But so authenticity is something that being honest is good. And we try to be, even when we know we are not being honest, but what we put out there is totally different from what people perceive us to be. So it's all about perception.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good observation. And so the ABCD part I like too. So
This
This is Sherry. I think being authentic really, it shows that you have that emotional intelligence
Mhm.
that you need to have to be connected with others.
Yeah, Sherry, that's a good observation. When we were learning coaching, we didn't exactly talk about Goleman's model, but the emotional intelligence is so much part of what we do in everyday life. So we did talk about the Johari window, and so I don't have time to get into that, but that's another important concept. Anyway, so people are longing for wholeness and full expression of themselves in every facet of who they are, what they are about, and all they do. So when we are dancing in the moment, in this moment, we're looking at people as to who they are. As I said earlier, when I was coaching this one individual, she was telling me about a job thing. She was, at first, when I was talking with her, it was all about jobs. But then later, when she said, well, the real problem or the real issue that I have is moving back in with my ex-husband. So you see, that she took the conversation from the work environment to the home environment. As a coach now, it's not my job to take her there. I mean, it's my job to ask the questions, and then the conversation will get you where it needs to go. Let me show a video. Have y'all heard the term psychological safety? Heard of it? I show these in some of my courses, and I want you to think about this as to, with this concept in mind. Is it true that sometimes people will not say something, do something? This is in the work environment, home, because of fear of repercussions. Is that possible?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, so let's take that in mind. So here we go.
A short answer to the question of how do you calculate the ROI to psychological safety is you don't. It's very hard to identify things that didn't happen. One of the most important outcomes of psychological safety is that people are speaking up with what they see, and oftentimes really big failures are being averted. Some of those failures are business failures, the headlines that you don't ever want to see about your company, and others are human safety or dignity failures, where someone is subject to worker injury and so forth. So when there's a more psychologically safe workplace, you are dramatically more likely to avoid some of those bad outcomes. Those will never show up on your income statement. The time frames will vary enormously. I feel safe enough to point out a flaw on a vehicle before it hits the customer. That's immediate. If I have a kind of a crazy idea that ultimately leads to a brand new product and product line 10 years from now that becomes $1 million business, the ROI is going to show up 10 years from now, and everything in between. But in a world that is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, right? So a VUCA world, you absolutely need people to speak up, full stop. It's just a necessity. So psychological safety isn't a magic bullet. It's not a new tool. It's the underpinning of all sorts of things that you really do want, right? You want innovation. You want teamwork. You want creativity. You want engagement. All of those things happen far more when you have psychological safety than when you don't.
Make sure to subscribe.
All right, so let's talk about that for a second. What resonated with that video when you saw that about psychological safety? What was important there when you think about dance in this moment and being whole, being approachable? What came to mind?
I have a question. Did she say that it's hard to identify what did not happen?
I think she did use that wording. It's hard to identify what did not happen. Because maybe someone did not take any action. I think that's the context of that conversation. If that helps.
It does. I can relate to that because I think that a lot of times decisions that we make are made on what we think may happen, and then they don't happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's important. And I think when we, I'm still I still remember the performance appraisal I had at USA when I was working as an IT staff analyst, and I walked in, and my manager said, "Hey, sit down, welcome, glad you could make it." And he said, "Hey, on this item, I scored you a 5 out of 10, but you knew you weren't doing well in that area." I was like, "Wait a second, I didn't know I was doing well in that area until right now." So again, it's good for us to approach folks early and have them make decisions. Now here, how does psychological safety relate to empowerment?
If you're allowed to speak your mind without any kind of break, well, my goodness, you might just feel like you're the most powerful person in the world if you can shoot your mouth off about everything and anything without any repercussions. And I'll tell you something, Jimmy, when I was listening to her, I mean, I'm getting that she was a proponent of all this, of a proponent of speaking your mind always, at work, wherever. And that's all, maybe I misunderstood her, but if I'm right, I mean, that's all very, very touching, but not realistic. You're not going to shoot your mouth off in every aspect. At work and everything like that, I mean, are you really going to shoot your mouth off about, I see something that's going to cost the organization $100 million. That could shut down the plant, that I can lose my job over, that everybody else is going to lose their job over.
Mm-hmm. Well, but look at it from this perspective, and just I think you made a valuable point there. One is empowerment. Like I remember reading a book by a guy named Herb Kelleher. Let's see, who remembers Herb Kelleher? Anybody?
Southwest Airlines.
Southwest Airlines, yeah. Because I tell that to our younger students, and they go, "Wait a second, who's that?" So Herb Kelleher started Southwest Airlines, right? And he said, what we want our employees to be able to make decisions at their level, So if I come up to the gate, and Southwest normally has a fee for changing a flight, but that agent feels that there's an extenuating circumstance, that agent can waive it. Say, today we're going to waive that. Right now with you, we're going to waive it. That's empowerment. And that's not to say that the policies and procedures are in place. That's important, but we don't want to be penalized for trying to do what's best for a student. I know all of us who teach, is it true that we've done some things that were not always correctly or directly aligned to policy? Have we ever done that?
Yes.
Extenuating circumstances, right? We've all situations said, that's the policy, was due this date, but this is different. This is unique. And so that's kind of where the psychological safety comes in. I did like the VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complex. What was the A? I forgot the A now. Ambiguous. Okay. So a VUCA world. Do we live in a VUCA world right now? Yes, we do. All right. So here are questions that come from our training as well. Can you tell by listening? What can you tell by listening to a person's voice? What can you pick up whenever you're listening to someone? By their voice, their intonation, and so on. What can you pick up?
I think you can pick up if they're confident by the way they're coming to how they're articulating what they're trying to say. I think somebody's voice can also tell you if they're nervous or if they're actually telling the truth or stretching the truth. Because not only are you listening to what they're saying, but if they're saying in front of you, you're watching their body language as well.
Yeah.
Kind of connecting the two.
Body language is a good one. I know I listened to a salesperson who does presentations. He says that humans are built with what they call a human lie detector. Like we can pick up when things are not squaring up. Is that a very good observation? Is that true?
Yes.
I think it works for some people, but I don't think that that's true for everybody.
It's true. That is a good observation. It cannot be universal. That would be a problem if I said something's universal, right? That is a good point.
I think it works better for women than men, if I can say that, and be psychologically safe.
Yes, you can't say
You're
it.
fired, sir. Get out.
I think that is a very good observation because, and that also changes the dynamics when you're speaking with folks. And when you're interacting with anyone in the way we communicate. Now, what we learned in coaching was if we hear somebody's voice and if their words are faster, they're moving, they say something with more rapidity, they tend to have an energy towards it. Like they want that. Or they're concerned, there's anxiety or something. If they slow down, like, well, I was, let me ask you, if I say something like this, what's in my voice? I had a call earlier today, and I'm not really sure what was there. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next.
I would say hesitation,
Yeah,
confusion, not really understanding the situation.
yeah.
And
Right.
see, I take that as you're pondering. You're still having some thought about that.
Okay. So wouldn't that be from a coaching standpoint? Now we can ask, can you tell me more about that, right? What is there? Those are coaching questions. What is there? What's holding you up? When you can say that as a coach, or as any one of us in here, when you're talking with a student, a coworker, whatever, say, it sounds like you were hesitating. Is there something there? You just wait. Now, that's the biggest thing we learn in coaching. Then you wait. What happens when there's that dead silence? What happens with people?
They feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. And should we at least give it some time? Maybe the other individual wants to just ponder that and think about it and say, yeah, there's something there. And then when you go ahead, I'm sorry, Richard.
Jimmy, I just think it's important that some of these are culturally dependent. Two things we've discussed here. Silence in some cultures is not a sense of nervousness. It's just a way of being, like in an Arab type culture or an Asian culture. And if you talk about speaking fast or whatever, that just is the meter of an Indian speaking English. They're trained not only in maybe more the Queen's English as opposed to American English, but their pace is almost double ours. And it doesn't mean anything. I've actually coached some Indian students to be aware of that. And in America, that changing that pace might help them because we're more used to something different that faster pace suggests. I never thought about it till today, maybe nervousness or something.
Well, that's a great observation, JR, because I mean, when I was working in Japan, the nod from the Japanese doesn't mean yes, I agree with you, right? And it's just a matter of placating the situation. But that's an excellent observation, is that culturally, this is why things have gotten maybe more difficult for us just in the workplace. I mean, we're working with so many people from many different backgrounds, and those are our students. Would you agree? Those are our students, people from different backgrounds?
Yeah, and different age groups, the millennials, I mean, my God, compared to the baby boomers, we will all probably taught and everything in between.
Yeah. And so talking about that, because I thought about this one long and hard today as I was working on finalizing the PowerPoint, is it important for us to find out what was not said in the conversation? What's the value of that?
Actually, Jimmy, I think we learn about other people based on not what they trying to tell us, but what they trying to not tell us. And those are the observations that we have in life. Let me just give you an example. If you come out as a friend and tell me who you are, actually, I may or may not believe you, and most likely I'm not going to be 100% sold on it unless I make observation about the behavior or
Mhm.
what you're not trying not to say, or the things that you're trying to hide from me, those are better representation of your identity and personality rather than what you're trying to convince me who you are.
Excellent, excellent point. I like that. And like, for example, I don't know if I said this before, there was a time, and maybe for 30 years, that I was really hesitant and embarrassed to say that I grew up in a migrant family and I was a migrant worker up until I was 18 years old. That was embarrassing to me. And then somebody in a meeting that I was attending said, "Oh, Jimmie's here. Man, he's got an interesting background. He was a migrant worker." He said it in front of a lot of people. And after that, I go, you know what? It's not too bad after all. Maybe that's, I never said it because I was embarrassed about it. Working the fields. Who wants to say, hey, you were one of these guys, But once it's known, you don't feel too bad about it, Somebody else was going to say something.
I was trying to say, you talk about being silent. That silence gives them room to reflect and talk more and probably respond to even on questions that you did not ask. I think it's a whole lot of, if you just silent, give them time, eventually they'll reflect more, they will speak more than the questions that you asked.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And there are people, I've had people say to me because of this coaching scenario, they'll say something like, hey, and I'm telling you exactly what I'm hearing because I did 100 hours of coaching, right? People would call me if we went a week or two without doing a coaching session. They said, hey, can we have a coaching session? And at the end, it's like, man, nobody really ever listens to me for 1 hour. Nobody ever just listens to what I have to say. Because normally, what are we doing? We're doing that crosstalk. And if our neighbor here right next door, he asked me, he said, hey, were you guys gone last week? And I go, yeah, my wife and I were celebrating our 24th wedding anniversary. So we were traveling last week. I said, where'd you go? And I told him, well, we went out to a Caribbean island. And all I said was that. He goes, oh yeah, but let me tell you about where we're going to go. And that whole conversation changed from the Caribbean thing to where they're going to go next month. It was just, that's exactly what you don't do in coaching. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't care about yourself, but coaching is about working with the other people and having them heard. So the example they showed us in the training, and this comes from the Legally Blonde movie, but I'm going to introduce it like this. It's only a minute, and don't worry about the context. But notice how two people can be in a restaurant and they don't really care about what's around them. That's this level 3 thinking that I mentioned the first time. They're just talking to one another and they're dancing in the moment. Okay, here we go. So, yep. Here we go.
Stop.
Oh,
Pay
sorry.
attention.
Wrong one. Sorry. I got a couple that I want to share there. Can you see the video?
Perfect.
So wonderful. Oh, thank you.
Here's to us.
Al,
Yes.
one of the reasons I wanted to come here tonight was to discuss our future.
And I am fully amenable to that discussion.
Good. Well, you know how we've been having all kinds of fun lately.
Yeah.
Well, Harvard is going to be different. Law school is a completely different world, and I need to be serious.
Of course.
I mean, my family expects a lot from me.
Right.
I expect a lot from me. I plan on running for office someday.
And I fully support that, Mona. You know that, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So if you, don't worry about the context of the movie because I've never watched it. My wife has watched it, but I have not. So when you think about have you ever had that one conversation with a friend, a colleague, and it's just that connection is what's there when when you've had that type of interaction?
There was really no interaction because it appears that one person is just listening to respond,
Exactly.
not fully listening to.
So you're observing something that is going on relative to one person being on, like, imagine one person being the coach, even though it was not a coaching session, right? But you're right. In this case, you did have one dominant, right? That's a good observation. Okay. That's an excellent observation. But have you ever been in a situation, any of you, where you're having a conversation with someone and you lose track of time? Why does that happen?
Well, because you're fully engaged in what's going on at the time. And so everything else around you kind of becomes a blur. You're really not having a focus on that. You're just focused on what you're doing at that moment in time with maybe that other person.
All right. So here's my challenge, because I like that. I like that. So what percentage of the time in our interactions are we fully engaged?
In this day and time, not very many, because we're either looking at our phone or checking our email or looking at what's on the television, or you've got your ear to the kids because maybe they're engaged in something. So most of the time, we're not really present in the moment.
Okay, we're not dancing in the moment. All right, so coaching question. Here's the follow-up. And we'll just keep it open here, okay? I'll just go like what I would be doing with the client. What would it be like to be fully engaged? So anybody can blurt out anything. What would it be like to be fully engaged?
I'm sure there's a range of probably reactions, even physiologically. You know, we probably have dilated pupils, you know, when we're focused on things. We have elevated, you know, levels of hormones and stuff that are going to make our concentration levels be better. You know, those kinds of things I bet are going on. In addition to maybe some things related to the spirit and the mind and the rest of the wholeness of the person.
Yeah. Okay. So Kevin, I'm doing some coaching things. So for those of you observing, these are things that we do. Kevin did this. So it's okay as a coach, do that. Hey, Kevin, you dilated pupils.
Yeah.
What's up with the dilated pupils? What's there when you think about dilated pupils and you interacting with other people?
Are you asking me that now or okay? I don't know. I just remember hearing things like that in like a psychology class, that whenever we're more focused and hyper attending to something, that we will have physiological changes that we don't even control, that are just instinctual, you know, that are somewhat related, I'm sure, to, you know, our biological evolution. You know, if there's fear, for example, you want your pupils to be dilated so you're processing as much visual information as possible to you know, remain safe. And I'm assuming that levels of engagement don't always have to be fear. It can be you're just very attuned to what's happening and very interested in the topic or the person.
Right. And I could go on with Kevin. So he's like, this is like this. So, hey, Kevin, so what does it feel like when you're processing information? You're processing, what would that be like? What's possible from there? Now, again, I'm exaggerating stuff, right? But again, imagine if you're having that conversation, people say, man, he heard I said pupils, exaggerating information. And before you know it, there's so much to work with. Now, Kevin's very easy to work with because he's doing stuff like this all the time. But imagine if you're working with some students or some employees that are just like yesterday, I was telling my wife, I had a Zoom call with somebody. Literally, the Zoom call lasted 3 minutes. And he said, hey, how are you doing? I said, I'm doing pretty good. How's that item coming along? I said, it's coming pretty good. I said, how's everything in your area? He says, well, it's okay here in Michigan. How's the weather? Oh, it's okay. Never changing like body language or anything. And I was like, thank goodness I don't have to coach that person, because I mean, where do I go with it? You know, like it was just so monotone that it was going to be hard for me to work with it. It was only 3 minutes and I was off the line. So anyway, Let me see.
Just before you get off that topic, Jimmie, I just want to say it was a very interesting comment that you mentioned, that you also are physically sort of modeling my behaviors. And in some ways that makes me maybe more engaged and attracted to what you're saying, because you appear to be like me and my body may respond to those movements more positively, you know?
Yeah, and we're not going to do this, Kevin, but in one of the training sessions that we went, this one lady says, well, yeah, I'm really excited about it. And the coach was like, man, when you said excited, there was something there. She goes, yeah. And he goes, what do you do when you're excited? And she said, I like to dance. And he goes, let's get up and dance. And so it was a presentation for us to learn coaching, right? And she got up to dance. Literally, they kept on the coaching thing, but they danced for like 4 minutes, and all of us were watching it. There's like 30 or 40 of us.
So this is still a coaching session, right, Jimmie?
No, this is a practice coaching session, but it was on Zoom. And it's interesting because he was from Barcelona, Spain, and she was in Athens, Greece, and they're both in lockdown. So that coaching opportunity gave her a chance to get up and have interaction. So,
Jimmie, may I make a comment here in regard to this? This is very profound. And don't you think that in dancing in those moments basically mostly would be impacted by other individuals' interest in you? Meaning that if you could be the best dancer in those moments if you know that your dancing is wanted, demanded, and those are the moments that you become more than who you are. Interest of the people that are in relationship or in communication with you. And that goes along with even our profession, our students.
Right.
Just imagine the moments when your students are listening to you and they are excited and they are paying attention to you, how much you become more of who you are.
yeah,
When you see everybody is basically out of there and they are not at the moment, you shut down too.
Yeah, I noticed that when you were saying that your voice kind of took on an excited role when you said students listening to us. There's something there for you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And again, so my point is basically how much the other person is excited or is perceiving you as an important individual in that relationship. That makes a big difference.
Yeah, I love this conversation because we could go on, and I know if we just talked about this a little longer, you would tell us why you have a passion for being with students. I mean, it came through in your conversation right there. I mean, I can feel it because I'm an instructor too. And so as a self-management, I'm an instructor too. I have to stop myself from jumping in your shoes because it's about you, see? But I can relate to it because it actually, when you said it, it hit me right here in the heart. Because I know how important it is to make connections with students, right? That's powerful. Yeah, love it. All right, and so again, one of the other things that we do in coaching is, where do you feel that? You know how I said it hit me in the heart? It felt right here, right here. That's an important connection to make with people because, like Kevin said, there's a physiological aspect to all of this stuff, right? It's not just mental, everything that we do or thinking. All right, so we've already talked about, let's do a couple of these though. What is an example of how you can dance in the moment with a family member, friend, or colleague? What's, based on what we've learned so far, what is an example of how you could do that?
Excitement. By conversating with maybe a family member,
Yeah,
friend, colleague, and that could happen through, just like what you said now, through hands motion or body language and your face. You talked about, what did you say about the eye bulging?
The pupils.
Yeah, the pupils bulging, that is, some people are that expressive. And
yeah,
the excitement.
That's a great observation. The pupils, and so what we do what I would have done with Kevin in that, we learn metaphors. So I said, Kevin, when you think about pupils, is it an animal? Is it a person? I mean, what does that person look like? And Kevin would say, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Kevin, but let me ask you this: when you think about pupils expanding, what metaphor comes to mind? You're on mute there, Kevin.
I don't know about a metaphor, but you know, the creatures that I see do this when they're highly attuned are like werewolves and vampires. I mean, you see that in the movies, you know, that they have a physiological reaction
Mhm.
that's different than their human form when they're sort of dancing in the moment of their beast.
Mhm.
Those are the ones that I think of. But in a metaphor, in terms of pupils opening, I mean, I guess you could say, you know, when you're in the moment, you are opening up and to allow in more opportunities for
Right.
you to, you know, change and learn yourself to get you through whatever it is that you're trying to dance with, you know.
And so Kevin was right. I mean, Kevin, I mean, you have a lot of stuff to work with there. I had enough stuff to work with you when you said a wolf in the, I don't know what you said, forest or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, movies and stuff.
Okay, movies are in the wild. But see, then I could take you there and say, okay, well, now let's look at this situation. You're that wolf. How do you look at that situation now? See, that's called a perception now, right? So before you thought, oh, I can't clear that. I can't solve that. But what if you looked at it from that angle, that perception? What's possible from here? So I had one person I was coaching who said, I think, you know, I really like Batman. That's my favorite hero. And then you take them through that. I said, well, what would Batman do in this situation? How would Batman?
Empowering. When you do it that way, it's empowering to the person. They don't feel like they're a victim of the circumstance. They feel like you know, they can move some pieces on the board.
And remember one thing, coaching is not therapy. So I would not qualify. So obviously, right? But I can go through training and be a coach. So we're not going to, therapy is a different scenario where, you know, that involves a lot of different schooling and education and so on. This is more about getting folks to look at things from a different perspective, and a perspective that gets them to their fulfillment. So homework inquiry for you, what is a big enough game for you? So let's think about this for next time. What is a big enough game for you? And I know that I'm going through this right now because before I came on this call, I was on a different call. And I have to make a decision if I'm going to invest the next 12 months of my time working on a big career goal, or if I'm going to let it go. So that's a big one for me. What is a big enough game? And I have to make that. In fact, I thought about calling my coach and having that conversation about this. So, all right, thoughts, questions? The next session is in the 18th. We've got Evoke transformation. So it's a really fun one to kind of bring things together. You know, how do we go from all of this that we've done to where we want to be? And I can talk about any questions, comments, ideas, feedback, whatever comes to mind.
I know.
May I also
This was awesome.
was that Dr. Raber?
Yeah, did you hear me?
Sure.
I said for me, this 50 minutes went by really fast. This was awesome. Very engaging.
Thank you,
We were dancing in the moment. That's why it went
I was
by so
dancing in the
quickly.
moment. Yes.
Yeah, dancing in the moment. It goes by. I mean, one of the things, once I learned, like, this would be very difficult if I didn't have techniques, right? You notice I didn't use a lot of slides, maybe 1 or 2 slides and 1 or 2 videos, but it was my job to get you guys involved. And if once we get that skill set, it doesn't feel like I wasted your time, right?
Here's what I notice as part of the coaching is you have to kind of start with an initial probe. And once you get that probe to where now they just give you something, then from that something, you begin your questioning to create more stuff, to create more questions, to eventually now help them understand their path, it seems like. And your questioning techniques are related to, you know, just getting that initial bit of information to look for as a starting point. Like I said, pupil, and then boom, from just that one word, you went off into a series of questions to create more data, let's say, to feed into your formula to say, now what's the next thing I have to do to affect the data, you know, that's coming out. So I really get that process that you're going through there.
Let me share one piece of advice. I mean, I'm obviously not just making stuff up here. So through our training, we practice these questions like, what does fun mean to you? You know, I'm not, what I'm telling you is that I'm not that smart. I go to training. So And these are serious. And then what I did from here, like history, like if you want to find out what happened with somebody in the past, what caused it, what led to it. Notice there's a lot of what questions, not a lot of why, because why means you have to explain in detail or in process. What questions open things up? And if you all want this, just email me and I'll send it to you.
That's so powerful.
Yeah. So again, we learn techniques.
Yeah, having the right questions can solve so many problems. And we don't necessarily want to call them problems. We can call them opportunities or barriers or whatever. But the point is, imagine beyond just a coaching scenario of an employee work setting. But again, my family members who also have, you know, sometimes need some help and support thinking through things. I can help them think through. That's what all those questions are doing. You're helping the coachee think.
Right.
Because eventually they'll ask themselves those own questions, themselves those same questions.
They will come up with the answer.
Yeah.
All right.
Very cool stuff. And that's what the goal of a coach is, and to have the coach no longer be needed.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Any other thoughts from the group? I have found this to be a very interesting series of connected pieces related to this larger concept, and to hear more about Jimmie's training that he had to go through and the extensive amount of hours just to even be able to call himself, you know, certified in this area. But it's just such a powerfully needed, and it sounds like really neglected facet of our lives that we don't get to do very often, which was sit and listen. You know, and someone to say, no one gave me an hour to listen ever. You know,
If
I
I
hold
could,
people hostage in meetings for an hour. They have to listen to me. But go ahead, John.
if I could, I wanted to share a story that's totally related to this and brings it back to the classroom as well.
Yeah, sure.
Earlier this year, I had a student and I failed the student. I mean, she got a 70 or whatever, but it was not passing according to our business school criteria. So she had to retake the course. And I was a little concerned. It's still me, it's still her, it's the same material. We communicated in the beginning by email, and she seemed psyched, but she was going to fail again. So at this point, I intervened. I said, let's get on Zoom. And our Zoom lasted about 90 minutes. I had it structured from the points of view. I wanted to communicate 5 or 6 things to her as tips. And I had asked her prior to that what her questions were. So we came prepared, but in a fairly unstructured way. She ended up passing the course with an 89%. She totally learned how, she's 2/3 of the way through our program. She probably wrote her first APA paper. She understands that now. And it all came from this, I guess, coaching, I mean, for lack of a better word, where we just set aside some time and connected on a human level. I mean, I sure as hell didn't want to fail her twice. And because she didn't deserve it. I mean, she had that, you know, inner desire. So I'm thinking all today as you're discussing your techniques and the whole thing, that is what occurred in this session. And as long as we have some smaller classes for a while, I'm now encouraging people to set up a Zoom, even though we're online. I'm encouraging them to do it in the first or second week so that we can, you know, break the ice, understand that there's a question we used to ask, is there anything muddy? Well, there's plenty muddy and confusing in any student addressing a new course and topic. So anyways, I just wanted to bring it back to that little story. It was really rewarding.
JR, so you gave me like in that, and I know we're up to time here, but in 3-4 minutes of listening to you, there was like so much material, muddy, helping students. I heard values, like I was listening for your values, helping, you didn't want to fail. That means you're a helper, you're a teacher, there's value. See how much data he gave us to work with in just 3 or 4 minutes?
And I don't want to take anybody's time, but listening to all this reminds me of Dr. Flores, probably you know about Lev Vygotsky when he talked about the zone of proximal development, where you lead a child where you need them to be, and then you hands off. So now they know to move on because you have led them to that answer. Now they can begin to walk through these things themselves. So you've received all the responses because you led somebody's kind of coaching. I don't know, it just came to my mind. I thought that was really interesting. That was good.
Yeah, that's really good. And I love that observation.
Yeah, that was good.
And if I could coach you guys, I would have a lot of fun. So,
Well, Jimmie, I noticed that there it was all highly engaging, as you can tell, because the topic is just so broadly applicable, I believe, or the techniques, I would say, and getting that, either John or anybody to start with the conversation. You said gave you a whole bunch of stuff that then now you just start asking questions about, and you slowly keep expanding that process. I just want to say one thing before we get off of here. I think the reason that John gave you all that information where you could identify him as a helper is because he also felt psychologically safe. No joke. I mean, that's such a critical concept. I know we talked about for a little bit, but then you got into also a question later to me that relates back to psychological safety, and that is what was not said.
Yeah.
And I think if I'm hiding something, it's because I don't feel safe. And so when something is not said, maybe that person is not in a state of psychological safety, therefore they hold back stuff.
Yeah.
But if you're psychologically safe, you're more likely to just not hide anything and not, although what was not said can sometimes be unintentional. Like you said, it was the body language really that was more than what his words were.
Because I don't want to lose that point, and I can intrude now because Kevin and I would have had a conversation. Kevin, so when you said, I think what happened there, you were using intuition. You see, all these skills are things that we use. And when he said, I think, intuition. It doesn't mean you're right, but you can say, I think. And then, yeah, you know what? Psychological safety. Anyway, we could go on and on, but
bye, y'all. Yeah, thank you
Very,
for showing up.
very insightful. Thank you, Jimmie.
2 more weeks will be the last part.
yeah, by the time I come back, I would have taken my final oral next week. So pray for me, okay?
All righty. Good luck.
Thank you. This was great. I appreciate it.
Take
Take care,
care,
Jimmie.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.